Welcome to the Just Ingredients podcast. I'm Cara Lynn, and here we talk all things nourishing to the mind, body, and soul. This is a place where you can find just good ingredients to life. Brienne Dressen was a preschool teacher with a passion for education and child development. Her experience in the AstraZeneca COVID vaccine clinical trial and subsequent injury has led her to become a vocal advocate for informed consent, transparency, and accountability in vaccine development and distribution. She is a co-founder of React 19, a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing resources, support, and community for individuals injured by COVID-19 vaccines. She has testified in the U.S. Senate, spoken at rallies and events, and featured in various media outlets, sharing her story and pushing for policy changes to better protect individuals who experience adverse reactions to COVID-19 vaccines. To date, React 19 has issued nearly $900,000 in medical grants to COVID vaccine-injured Americans in need. She is currently a plaintiff in two precedent-setting lawsuits. The first, Dressen versus Flaherty, aims to restore the First Amendment, challenging the Biden administration's role in censoring Americans through social media platforms. The second is a COVID vaccine injury lawsuit against a drug company in Dressen versus AstraZeneca. Both cases are set to begin deliberations this fall. Brianne's advocacy work has resonated with many, inspiring a growing community of advocates and individuals seeking support and answers about COVID-19 vaccine safety. Her dedication to this cause has made her a leading voice in the movement for vaccine safety and awareness. Welcome back to the show, everyone. Today's guest story is so fascinating. I think you are going to find this episode really intriguing. And so I am really excited to talk to you today. So welcome, Brienne, to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So I am curious. I just want to know about this story. So if you'll just tell a little bit about yourself and this story that I'm referring to.
Okay. So it all started, 4 years ago when I was just an everyday mom, preschool teacher. And, I really took a lot of pride on taking care of my community and my family and just, living life to the fullest. We did hiking, skiing, all the water sports, all the snow sports, everything that makes you drawn to the mountains and helps you reconnect with nature. And we focused a lot of our time on, teaching our kids those principles to take care of your community and to reconnect through nature, right? So that's where I started. And of course, the pandemic hit. And just like everybody else, I was shocked at what I saw on the news. I was shocked what I saw and what I heard from my family members who work in the medical profession. And I was very concerned. My news media outlets, just, precursor was NPR, CNN. I was very much plugged into what I call now as the mainstream narrative. I did the masking. I collected over 1,000 N95 masks and took them and helped people smuggle them into the major hospital systems here in the state. And I just wanted to make sure that I did my part to make sure that nobody was, being overburdened by the stress of the situation. So that's where I started. I was following the science on this very closely because my husband, he's a chemist. And so science has always been fascinating for us in our house. It was a really big part of my preschool, actually, was teaching kids how to foster that curiosity to ask questions, to investigate where those questions would lead, so they can learn how to find answers on their own, which, believe it or not, with little minds, that's the perfect time to start fostering that curiosity, right? So it just seemed natural for me when I started hearing about the clinical trials for the COVID vaccines. It just seemed natural to me to be able to investigate it and see if it was something that I could participate in. I had two healthcare professional friends that had signed up for the Moderna trial, and they did fine. So I signed up for a clinical trial with AstraZeneca here in the United States, and I voted for Joe Biden on Election Day in 2020. And then the next day I walked into the clinic, the test clinic, and my life changed forever.
And that's what I'm curious to know about. What happened?
So within an hour of my injection, I started having an adverse reaction. So if you can remember where you were in November 2020, it's a little bit of a different situation for most people because most people still had yet to be able to roll up their sleeves to get the shot. They still weren't publicly available until the end of November. So within an hour, I started having pins and needles down the same arm as my injection. And within the next 2.5 weeks, I landed in the ER 4 times. I was hospitalized. And because my legs stopped working, I had become incontinent. And I had food sensitivities, vision issues, extreme nerve pain throughout my body, tachycardia, which is your heart just races for no apparent reason whatsoever. Had extreme sensitivity to light and sound to the extent that I had to be closed and pulled away and put in my own bedroom 24/7, removed from my family, from my husband.
Wow.
Yeah. My teeth were so sensitive, I couldn't brush my teeth. So it was extreme.
Yeah, that is. So when you would go to the ER, what would they give you a diagnosis or what would they say was wrong?
It was interesting, right? Because I actually was diagnosed with a vaccine reaction in several of those visits, but they just didn't know what to do about it. So in the ERs, they kept asking me, well, what is the drug company saying about this? This is their product. And I came into that clinical trial at the very, very end of phase 3. So that means that they had all of that data and information from phase 1 and phase 2 and part of phase 3. So they already had a pretty good idea of what the benefits and the risks for the product were at that point. But that was part of signing up for the clinical trial, was that if there was a problem, they would jump in and they would help us, the participants, medically and financially. So that's what I was waiting for. I was waiting for the drug company to jump in and say, hey, we've seen this case, and this case in the past. But, my first cry for help started the day after my reaction started. And still to this day, I have not had any dialogue directly with the drug company. As soon as I was a problem, it's as if they couldn't get rid of me fast enough. But I didn't see that at the time. I just kept going, oh, well, the pandemic's super busy. I'm sure they're overwhelmed. They'll get back to me when they can. And
wow.
But as time has gone on, it's obviously proved differently. So when I was in the hospital, hospital was a different story when I was hospitalized because I was crying because my legs weren't working. So they looked at me and they said, COVID's been a really challenging time, a really stressful time for all of us. And we think you just kind of got a little stressed out and you went and got this vaccine and just kind of had a mental breakdown.
Wow.
So after the hospital visit, I went home with a diagnosis of anxiety due to the COVID vaccine after they had run no tests while I was there, not even an MRI, not a lumbar puncture. They did a standard blood test and an EMG.
Wow.
So, yeah.
It sounds like they just didn't even know what to do with you. And so they just sort of made up a conclusion is what it sort of sounds like.
Yes. Yeah. And it was kind of fascinating on the back end knowing what we know now. But my husband right away, he started looking into the chemistry that could be going on. And he actually had this pegged in the first week. He knew that it was immune mediated. He knew that there was some type of autoimmune cascade going on. He had already identified several studies that had postulated that the COVID vaccines could do this even before the vaccines hit the market. And it's a concept called molecular mimicry, where the immune system identifies the spike protein generated by the vaccines, but it looks incredibly similar to a molecule that's already in your nervous system. So if your immune system is trained just a little bit off, it will not only attack the spike protein as intended, but it will also start attacking your nervous system, which is exactly what's going on with me.
And so no one in the hospital could realize it was a nervous system attack. That was just something your husband figured out.
Yeah. And he actually brought the studies. I remember him standing over my hospital bed, literally begging the specialist to just look at the studies that he had in his hands and to provide me immunotherapy, which they wouldn't do. So,
and why wouldn't they?
I can't figure it out. The more I look into this particular hospital system, the more I'm curious about how much money they were getting from, other places that only stood to benefit from the vaccination program and the rollout. And also, I'm sure that the specialists at that time in that hospital were really traumatized from seeing all of the ICU patients at that point that were dealing with COVID. And at that point, everybody was being told that the vaccines were going to stop the pandemic. And, if that patient that just died yesterday in the ICU, if they just would have had a chance with the vaccine, maybe they would have been okay. Maybe that child that, had a massive stroke from COVID, maybe they would have been okay if they were just vaccinated first, So I think there was a lot of emotionally charged biases that were driving people to make decisions even before the facts were out.
And so they sort of wanted to put blinders on that there might be something wrong with the vaccine because they had such high hopes that this was going to be the cure-all.
Yeah. Yeah. And I still genuinely believe that people are really well-intentioned. I still genuinely believe that everyone on what side you're on this perspective, because it seems like there's only two camps, right? Both camps really do genuinely want the best for people. They don't want people to be harmed. They want people to be able to be protected and for families to be safe and for families to be healthy. But it's just interesting to see just how differently they see and how passionate some people are with, getting to that point where people can be safe and thriving and healthy.
Yeah, you're right. Both camps do want to be healthy and safe and not harmed, but in complete different ways.
Yes.
So you're right. Okay, I want to go back to the clinical trial, though, because we'll go talk about some of what you just said in a minute. But back to the clinical trials, did they tell you up front that they would help you if there was anything that went wrong with it? Or where did that come from, that thought that they would come help you?
Yeah, so it's actually specifically listed in the contract. I wouldn't have signed up for this had I known that I was going to be abandoned. There's no question. So in the contract, they specifically state that they will help me financially and medically if there's a problem.
And so are they held liable to this since they haven't helped you?
Well, this is what's interesting. So to fast forward a little bit, but I am being backed by some lawyers, and we have filed a lawsuit. It's been a very, very long, exhaustive 3.5 years to get this to this point. I just want to make it very, very clear. I'm not someone that runs out and sues people. I've never sued anyone before in my life before this happened. And we did everything we could to try to work through this with them outside of the court system. And the reality is they just left me no choice. So the challenge is actually the end of October, we're going into court. And the first challenge that the drug companies are going to allege is that the PrEP Act is going to protect them.
And what is that act exactly?
So the PrEP Act is a little known law that was put into place after 9/11. It's called the Preparedness, Readiness, Emergency Act. And so essentially what this does is it gives the government additional flexibility to act quicker in the case of an emergency. Now, of course, the drug companies, because they're already immune from liability due to the 1986 vaccine law, they were able to leverage the government just a little bit more to provide them incredible layers of protection when they roll out products under the banner of a emergency, which is exactly what this is. And so they are protected all the way through, even to be able to commit willful misconduct.
Wow.
So that's the entire argument that AstraZeneca is using within my case, is to say, hey, we're protected. The government said we can do basically whatever we want, so we don't owe her a cent. It's a precedent-setting case. Obviously, it's the first of its kind to be filed here in the United States. And we're hoping that, obviously, that the law will side on the side of the American person, right? The everyday American person instead of big corporations. But that will be seen to, come through in time.
Yeah, that can be a really dangerous act if used improperly like this. And so are there other people that have been injured that were in this clinical trial?
Yes. So there are, the most that I know of are with the AstraZeneca COVID vaccine. And I know three from Pfizer, one from Moderna, and 3 from J&J. Yeah. So it's something that unfortunately has happened. And the fact that me as just one person, that I've been able to find about a dozen other people like me from all of the different brands, it's a little something people don't know about.
Yeah. Okay, so back to this clinical trial. You said that you were in phase 3 of this trial. So did they have other people in phase 1 and phase 2 have these terrible side effects and just didn't want to tell you about them, or what? How did that go down?
This is what I'm hoping I'm going to find out more. I want to really know what they knew when. In the informed consent document that I signed when I enrolled in the trial, they had noted that there was a case of MS in the UK. And of course, when they talked through the contract with me, it was very obvious to them that they were like, well, but MS just happens in people. So it was a pre-existing condition. So you don't really need to worry about that. So I was like, okay. Mm-hmm. What I didn't know at the time was that literally 2 days after I signed that contract and 2 days into my injury, they revised the informed consent document to say specifically that there's peripheral and central nervous system damage, and it must be treated promptly because it can lead to death.
Oh, wow.
And nobody told me that.
Wow.
So...
And was that changed because they heard of what happened with you, or why was that changed so quickly?
I'm not sure. I would suspect that it changed that quickly because they had other people that had reported similar things, but that's just an assumption at this point. But I'm hoping that I will be able to learn exactly when they knew that. But
right.
It's been kind of frustrating for me, because not only have we been struggling with this every single day, trying to come up with the answers totally on our own, but we also had the National Institutes of Health backing us up. So there's a research team that was working directly under Anthony Fauci in the neuroinfectious disease department, Dr. Ravindranath and Dr. Safavi. They put together a study on COVID vaccine adverse events. And this started in January of 2021. So the majority of the public still had yet to get their shot while the NIH was investigating neurological complications to the COVID vaccines. The NIH reached out to my hospital system that diagnosed me with anxiety, and they personally went to bat for me. And they said, look, this is an immune-mediated disease. It's attacking her nervous system. You need to provide her IVIG, steroids, plasmapheresis, or some other immunotherapy. And at that point, the hospital system here still wouldn't do it. So the NIH ended up flying me out.
Wow.
When I was there, So when I was there in person, they diagnosed me with post-vaccine neuropathy, severe postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which is basically your heart can't keep up when you're sitting upright or standing upright. They also diagnosed me with tinnitus, short-term memory loss, and a whole litany of other things. And it was the first time in my illness that I had been validated by medical professionals was at the lead research institution here in the United States at the NIH.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
So when the NIH informed your hospital, why didn't the hospital help you out?
I have no idea. They actually fired me.
Oh.
as a
Okay.
patient. They were like,
Oh,
you're
wow.
going to tell on us to the government. Okay, you're out of here. So,
And a hospital is allowed to do that.
yes. Yeah.
Wow. That's fascinating. Okay. So with this story and this trial, did you end up finishing the trial, or did you, once you were not feeling well, you just stopped it?
Another weird twist in this. And I wish that none of this was true. I wouldn't have believed any of this had I not been living this firsthand and had I not seen all of it with my own eyes and literally experiencing it with my own body, right? So when I was in the hospital, I was unblinded by the drug company. They called and they said, we just need to confirm with you that you did receive the COVID vaccine. It wasn't a placebo. And we are advising you to not get the second dose. What I didn't realize at the time was that was a loophole for the drug company to then drop me out of the trial. So in the actual clinical trial report, I am coded as a dropout. The dropouts in the clinical trial are spun as people that just chose to forego getting the second dose, which is which is completely untrue in my case. And my assumption is that there are other people like me in the document. Actually, I know for a fact there are other people like me in the documents. I've met them. What people don't understand is that these clinical trials are not designed to identify objectively risks and benefits. They are fully sponsored and designed ahead of time with the drug company's money and the drug company's direct influence. These are not being carried out by a totally independent research institution, which is what we all, have been kind of raised and conditioned to believe that's what clinical trials are done, right? Especially in science class, if you're back in biology, they're telling you how this is all working. The money has been able to corrupt these systems little by little over the years. So the principles by which we were taught in school, there's issues in all of them.
Yeah, this is really sad and scary because you think, oh, okay, it's a clinical trial. They're setting up, parts A, B, C, D, E, whatever, so that this runs really professionally and effectively and correctly. And then you see all these loopholes and things that happen so that the money can speak.
Correct.
So it's really scary because then who do you trust? Which study do you trust?
Exactly. And that's where it's convenient for me to have a scientist in my house that can literally go in and look at the documents, read exactly what's going on. He can see the flaws in the data. He can identify them. And we've actually done that several times where we've gone back to several drug companies now and said, hey, this doesn't add up. This doesn't add up. This doesn't add up. What's going on? Which of course they won't respond. But,
right.
Yeah.
This is so interesting. Okay, so I'm curious now, it's been 4 years. So do you still have side effects and terrible nerve issues, or are you feeling pretty good?
Yeah, so it's the up, yes and no. Is it getting better? Yes. Is it getting worse? Yes.
Boy.
Some things are getting better, some things are getting worse. When I was at the NIH, they started me on a drug. It's actually a biologic. It's called IVIG. It's essentially 1,000 to 10,000 people's immune cells in a bag, and they infuse it into your veins. And so the purpose of it is to dilute your malfunctioning immune system with healthy functioning immune cells. That has dramatically improved my ability to get out of bed, get in the shower, cook a meal for my kids, even sitting on the couch and listening to my daughter tell me about her day at school, right? These are all things that if your health isn't working out, you can't do any of those, right?
Right.
So for me, it felt like I had won the lottery, just being able to get out of my bed and do a few things. But I'm still largely housebound. I still can't drive. My neuropathy is still progressing up my legs, and so I can't feel my feet. So a few months ago, I fell down the stairs because I couldn't feel my feet, sprained my ankle. And the pain that I experience because my immune system is constantly eating away at my nerves it's this incredibly painful electrical pins and needles prickling sensation. And it moves, from head to toe. It starts with my heart. So it starts from my heart, goes out, it goes back in. And it's with me every second of every day.
Wow. So you are just dealing with a lot. So are you working with medical doctors to help you with this? Are you working with holistic doctors, a combination? What's your approach on this?
This has been another, transition for me mentally, because I came from, staunch, allopathic medicine is the way, right? And through this process, I learned just how important and essential the natural modalities, reconnecting with your body, just even spiritually, how powerful that is for your healing. So I'm working with allopathic medicine, that's how I get my autoimmune condition really hammered back. But a lot of my time and a lot of my focus right now is actually on these natural healing modalities, diet, making sure that I'm resting well, meditation, grounding, ice baths, which that's been fun. But, and it's so fascinating to me too. And so I'm really enjoying learning about this whole world that I just refused to look at before.
And why do you think you refused to look at it before?
It's crazy to me. I had a personal experience in my family where I had a loved one who died from cancer, and she died far too young. And we were all so frustrated because we're like, man, if she just would have gone into her doctors, then she'd still be alive. And it's crazy to draw that parallel now, because now it's, I know so many people that have really experienced catastrophic effects from the COVID disease itself, long COVID, and, just dying from it. And it's the same thing. Gosh, if they just had gotten that vaccine, they'd still be alive, right?
Okay.
But in reality, there's no way for us to actually know that. Because, until you actually are there and you're faced with the product and everything else, we don't actually know. And so that's where I think I was just so seeped in, this is the way, everyone else is lying. And yeah, I was programmed.
It makes sense. A lot of people are and were. And I think some people are waking up to, at least I feel like people have woken up to, I need to take care of my health the best that I can and support my immune system the best I can, because there's nothing really, there's no one thing out there or one person out there that's going to protect your own health. It comes down to you doing it. And so I think people are realizing that after COVID.
100%.
Let's take a quick break to hear from our show sponsor. It's an exciting week here at Just Ingredients. We are getting ready for fall with the launch of new seasonal products: Cozy Chai Nighttime Drink, Pumpkin Spice Protein Powder, Apple Cider Protein Powder, a Pumpkin Spice Non-Toxic Candle, and a delicious Pumpkin Spice Muffin Mix. Plus, I'm excited to announce that Dr. Red and I are launching a new book, diving deep into the topic of inflammation, how it impacts chronic disease, and it has anti-inflammatory recipes to help you feel better. It's going to be a feel-good fall for sure. Dr. Red and my book will be available on Amazon starting on September 4th. The other new fall products will be launching on September 5th at justingredients.us, and they will be 20% off from September 5th until the 7th. Now back to the show. You talked about that you've changed your diet. And so do you feel like food sometimes gives you a flare-up in your issues, or does food help at all? What are you finding?
Okay, so when I started, I'm just going to be totally honest, right? And so all of the women out there, I'm sorry, I'm going to break the cardinal rule.
What we want to hear.
So I weighed 138 pounds when this started. Within 2.5 months, I weighed 105 pounds.
Oh, wow.
So, and I'm 5'9". So that's, so I'm not a little, that was a pretty drastic change for me. It was all because of my diet. So I was eating, they were trying to give me bread, little tiny pieces of toast, little bit of soup here and there. And even that I couldn't tolerate. It would just go straight through me. And they were this close. So they were, I was within probably a week or two of getting a feeding tube installed.
Wow. So you just couldn't hold anything in.
Nothing. My body was reacting.
Any nutrients.
Yeah, it was. And of course, that's not going to help the autoimmune cascade that was going on. So yeah, so I started with sipping a little bit of ginger tea, a couple times a day. And then okay, all right, at least getting a little bit of liquid in. Okay, this is working out. And then we started adding organic potatoes, organic rice, organic chicken, organic steak. And all of a sudden, this brain fog, painful nightmare that I was trapped in started to release. And it literally started with good, clean, organic food. And it was just stuff that you can see what the meat looks like, not mass processed hot dogs or salami. You can see that it's a slab of meat, and you can tell what animal it comes from. But then also the vegetables and the fruits that I was consuming and still consume to this day, it's the exact same. If I can tell that it comes straight out of the ground from the farm, then it's a product that I eat, right? I don't eat stuff that comes out of a box anymore, other than your protein shakes. I do make an exception there, believe it or not.
Oh, well, thank you.
That's made the pass, but
that's actually good to know. I mean, it is real food put in a bag, so.
Exactly. Well, yeah, and you've got really good amino acids in there. And when I look at the packages now on products, I can tell what is in your product, which is incredibly freeing for people like me, because you look at the backs of products and it's like, you don't even know what half of the stuff is. And so so that's why Just Ingredients has been such a really good brand for me personally, because it's been an element of convenience, but also essential nutrients that I'm not actually able to get from my very, very restricted diet as it is. But that's really what it's been, has been simplifying all the way back to straight up, farm to table style eating, and the pain loosened and the clarity returned.
I always say it's foods from nature that were meant to help us heal and nourish our bodies. And so it makes sense, though, because the processed foods, the sugary foods, the, highly processed, ultra processed with the seed oils, things like that, can cause a lot of inflammation in the body, which then would cause inflammation with your autoimmune issues. And so that's, I'm sure, why you're seeing the difference, correct?
Yeah. And it's kind of funny because we just stumbled into it.
Yeah. Because we didn't live this lifestyle before the incident.
I had no idea. So
you just ate whatever the shelves had because you thought that was safe, and why would the government put anything on the shelves not safe?
Exactly. Well, yes. And I remember my mom's voice telling me that growing up. They wouldn't put that in your food if it was going to hurt you. There's no way.
Yeah.
I love you, Mom.
I grew up with that too.
Yeah.
I grew up with that as well.
So, yeah. But it's been great. It's been, even my skin's better. My teeth are even whiter. So there's a lot of other benefits to just eating clean, in addition to feeling better.
And so you're still working with practitioners to hopefully alleviate some of these other symptoms.
Yeah. So a big one actually is Jared St. Clair, which I know that you know who he is. He owns a supplement store and a supplement brand, Vitality Nutrition. And there's been several natural providers that have tried to work with me, but they start out with, "I'm so sorry you were dumb enough to do this."
Oh, yikes.
And so that never worked out for me to be able to open up my heart to them and be receptive to what they had to share with me. At that point, it was just walls up, I'm done, right?
Right.
Jared never did that. You're also one of those people that have never done that to your people that come into your store, because we all are just learning as we go. And, we gain perspective as we move through this experience we call life. And who are any of us to judge?
Right. Exactly. And like you said at the beginning of the show, we all have the same common ground of wanting to stay protected and healthy and safe. We just went about it in different ways, the two camps. But we all had the same thing, or same mission, I should say. Okay, so I'm actually interesting, though, because due to all of this, you started React 19, correct? Is that why this started?
Yeah, it was, after appealing to the drug companies for months, and then going to the government for months and cooperating with the government for months through the research at National Institutes of Health, working with the heads of the FDA, we realized that they weren't going to do anything in any kind of amount of time that was going to provide relief for the thousands and the tens of thousands of others that we had met like us. And so me and several medical professionals that were injured got together and started a proper 501c3 organization. It's called react19.org. We currently have over 36,000 COVID vaccine injured Americans just here in the United States. That's with all of the shadow banning, our socials being shut down, and but we've still been able to amass that amount of people in the shadows, right?
Wow. How did you find all those people?
It's been through word of mouth, a lot of it, literally. So my husband even will get phone calls through his phone number that who knows where it's even listed, for people trying to get in touch with me because their wife is, on death's door, or their son suffers a severe stroke, or, their mother is dealing with a severe skin issue that they can't figure out what it is. So they just kind of come from everywhere. And it's what happens when you're dealing with a mystery illness. We're all adults, right? Other than the kids. But we know exactly what happened to us because we've lived in our bodies for decades at this point. So we know what happens when we take a medication and there is a problem, right?
Yeah.
And the majority of our membership deals with these reactions. They start within 48 hours.
Do they come to this website, and is there a community purpose to this website, like to get help and find answers for other people? Or what is the whole, why did you start it? What's the whole main purpose?
The whole purpose is to essentially do what the government is not doing, to provide physical, financial, and emotional support for people that are suffering adverse events to the COVID vaccines. So in the physical support, we actually do have a network of natural and allopathic providers nationwide. Unfortunately, a lot of them, it's like an underground network. I can't tell you how many times we've had to fly critically ill patients across the country just to get them access to essential medical care that they literally could get from their hospital down the street, but their hospital down the street won't acknowledge what's going on. Emotional support, so important. Family members that do not validate people's injuries, their friends that do not validate them, it puts these people in a very vulnerable, scary situation where a lot of people have, opted to end their lives because they just don't feel like there's anywhere else that they can go. The first step in healing for me and for so many others in my situation is love and acknowledgement. That's it. And so we're able to provide that for people. We're able to validate what they're feeling, which a lot of the time people don't even know where to begin because they can't understand what's going on in their bodies. And then also financial support, which this is kind of turned into a cornerstone of what we do. So we are currently volunteers that have all just come together to help, essentially the greater good, right? And in doing so, we've realized that there is no financial support for these people. A lot of them can't even get disability. They have been wrongfully terminated from their jobs because they're dealing with an ailment that's, a mystery ailment, or it's anxiety, right?
Wow.
And the government compensation programs, you could do a whole podcast on the failures of the government, compensation programs, but they have a 98% rejection rate. And as of July 2024, they have paid out $41,000.
Oh,
total.
My goodness. And why is this? Because doctors won't give a diagnosis of what people are dealing with, so then they feel like they don't need to compensate, or something completely different?
It's, it's the same reason that you're hearing that these are 1 in a million adverse events, right? So if they actually acknowledge the rate at which this is happening, and they do end up compensating 11,000 Americans with injuries, then there's something wrong, right? If they compensate 12 and reject the rest of them, then they can still continue to say these are fine.
Interesting.
And that's probably a very biased answer, but that's my lived reality.
Yeah, it is your reality.
Fighting with these guys. Sure. And we've gone to Washington, D.C. several times. We go every single year to try to get even the politicians to recognize and address the issue. There's been several bills that have been put forward, and they always failed because the pharmaceutical lobby comes in and says, nope, this is going to eat into our margins. You can't do it. So it's a big money machine at this point. So
that is fascinating hearing that about the bills, because you sort of hear that off of media. You know what I mean? You'll hear people talk like, oh yeah, pharmaceutical companies just come in, they rule everything. But to hear it from a person who has personally experienced it and been on Capitol Hill, that's incredible. I mean, it's reality that it's happening, but what can we even do about it?
Well, this is another case of I would not have believed this had I not seen it with my own eyes. So we have a injured professional mountain biker. It took him out of his career. His name is Kyle Warner. He agreed to be our lobbyist for this year. So he goes, because he had seen just how frustrating, the wheels of the bureaucratic machine is. And he was like, I'm going to make the changes. We're going to fix the compensation program and we'll be able to get everybody financial relief. So he goes to Washington. He's there, pounding down doors every single day. And even just by coincidence, every single day, at least 1/3 of the appointments that he had, the pharmaceutical lobby was either coming in the doors right before him or right after him. And there were always 2 or 3 of them. So the pharmaceutical lobby in Washington, D.C. is bigger than the defense lobby. So
wow.
There's a massive amount of influence, a massive amount of power there. And the sad reality is when there's big corporations with that much money and influence coming into Washington to change laws and just tweak the words of laws here and there, little by little, every single year, it doesn't end up well for the everyday American person. And that's kind of where we ended up with the COVID vaccines. Because when you get injured by a COVID vaccine, you have no idea that your right to due process, your right to a jury trial has already been removed. And none of us know.
Because of the bills that have been passed to protect the pharmaceutical companies.
Correct.
Wow.
So,
and how do we get more people to even be aware of this or to know of this?
It's, censorship is a real thing, right? I personally was told by the New York Times twice that they can't make the vaccines look bad.
Wow.
We've been told those types of, because we have tried everything we could to work within the bounds by which all of us have been taught to do in this type of situation. Reach out to your politicians, reach out to the media, and these guys will help you. And instead of being met with open ears and eyes and minds, we're met with closed doors, and we're met with a very harsh reality that I don't think any of us knew the extent to which drug companies are willing to go to make sure that they're not caught.
And to make their money.
And to not, it all comes down to the almighty dollar.
Yeah, in lots of different industries. So it is sad. Okay, but I do have a question, because you were talking about your React 19 website, and you were talking about how you provide a lot of support, but saying different doctors that could help people in different states. And you were saying some are like underground doctors, like they don't want to be known that they can help people. Is that what you're basically saying? And why don't they want to be known?
So good example of this is there was an 8-year-old girl in Virginia who was injured by her COVID vaccine, totally healthy before, running around doing jumps, flips, playing with her sister and just living life. And she goes and does what her country asks her to do. And she gets a shot. And she had a reaction very similar to mine. And I can only imagine being 8 years old with this painful electrical sensation and not being able to articulate that. So this 8-year-old child was crying and screaming and rolling around on the floor. And then her legs stop working and she can't even stand up, right? And then she's in diapers. So this child ended up in diapers in a wheelchair by the time we found her.
Well,
She had been committed in Johns Hopkins in the psych ward. Instead of actually providing her immunotherapy, listening to her parents actually talk about the timeline of events, and looking at what pharmaceuticals happened when, they just locked her up because the child was so inconsolable.
that is the saddest story I have heard.
It's so heartbreaking. So she was there for 3 weeks, continued to decline because obviously it's not a psych condition. And that obviously also is another thing. If you're doing something for 3 weeks and your condition is declining, sorry, but there's something else going on. So the mother found us and we connected her with a provider in New York that was able to get her daughter the therapy that she needed, which we had learned about that therapy from the National Institutes of Health when we were there and we were working with them. And they were sending, and taking care of patients in private across the country. We learned a lot during that time. So the mom went and broke her child out of the psych ward, and we got them money through the Care Fund, which is essentially a compensation program that we have developed that's totally grassroots, that provides money to people in need like this mom and her daughter. They were able to fly her to New York, get her the essential immunotherapy that she needed, and she walked into school that fall as if nothing had happened to her. And
Wow.
her mom still comes and calls me and says, I want to figure out how to get back to this community. And I said, the whole purpose of us putting these programs together is to be able to give your child her life back and other people like her. Just to give them a second chance at life makes all of it worth it. All of the controversy that comes our way, the hate from both sides, the crazy political polarization, the true ugly underbelly of what we endure all the time, just speaking out and trying to spread awareness, just knowing that there's even one child that got her life back makes it all worth it.
I was going to say that is an incredible story. And I am always amazed with the people that come on this podcast that have gone through really hard times, really hard trials. And because of those trials, want to help others and do better. And that is exactly what you're doing, which is so honorable. And so just a huge thank you for taking your own pain and, your sorrows and issues and grief and trying to help others with it, because that's really an honorable thing. So we need more people like you in the country, trying to make good out of their bad. So thank you for what you're doing.
Well, thanks.
So for people that are listening, is there a way that they can help with React 19 so that more people are aware of this?
Absolutely. You can start with sharing these stories. Look up the website, share the website with your friends and family. There's 3,600 studies that are directly connected to adverse events to the COVID vaccine. So there's something there for your scientific friend. There's something there for your friend that really just, connects to the heart with over 1,000 stories that are their firsthand accounts, by the way. And then there's also the almighty dollar. These people have nothing and we're all volunteers, and any money that does come in, we make sure that it gets into the hands of those people that need it, to literally get them out of their sick beds, get them out of wheelchairs, and just provide them a little bit of hope to help them, hang on just a little bit longer. So it's really just grassroots talking about it. We've all been conditioned so heavily at this point that, vaccines and vaccine adverse events are so controversial. We're just not going to talk about it. Let's just not talk about it because it's so upsetting for people, and it just hits people emotionally, which it shouldn't, right? Like if your friend comes to you and says, I have MS, then the first thing you think is their medical condition. And when I say I have a vaccine injury, the first thing people think is political polarization. So we really need people on a grassroots level to look inside themselves and recalibrate how they're reacting to the topic in general, and start talking about it. And start talking about it with compassion. Talk about it as a medical condition, because that's all it is. It's a medical condition.
Which is so interesting because it is a medical condition and there are vaccine injured people, but people don't want to accept that. And you're right. When people say I'm vaccine injured, there's immediate judgment that are put on people. Like, well, why'd you do it then? Why this? Why that? Why, what are you trying to achieve through your advocacy?
It's literally just trying to get people better. It's trying to provide healing for people. And I understand that acknowledgement is step one. If you don't see that there's a problem, if we can't recognize that there's an issue, help won't come. So it's pretty simple. The motivation is pretty simple.
Well, and then I'm thinking about, because I have a lot of followers who DM me on a daily basis, and they're dealing with a lot of health conditions. So talking to you, I'm almost wondering, maybe some of these people have some vaccine injured type of health conditions, but don't even connect it to the vaccine and don't even know where to start. Because if you go to hospitals and you're not even getting help, like, where do these people even start?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's why your type of platform that you've been able to provide for people is so important, because the hospitals and the government are not providing answers for people because it's inconvenient for what they're trying to do. So that's where it really is so important for us to be able to sit and listen to each other and try to find these answers. And there's so many people out there that don't realize what's going on in their body could be set off by a pharmaceutical, whether it's a vaccine or Ozempic or any of these other products that are popular, because they're not told to look for that, because they were conditioned just like I was as a child and, as a young adult. FDA wouldn't do that to you. If there was a problem, they would tell us. But, reality is different.
All right. So these people that have possible health concerns, do they have to go to one of these underground doctors that are on your website? But we never answered the question why they're underground.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I understand, right during the vaccine, I know doctors were very hesitant to say much, but it's been 4 years now. So are they still underground, or are they coming out and helping people more?
They're starting to relax for sure. The climate is not what it was in 2021 and 2022. But with that said, there still is a very firm and clear communication from the American Medical Association and medical boards. That's a very firm and, threatening stance. So these medical providers are still being put in the middle between, the big money bullies and trying to take care of their patients. And some of them are choosing to step up against the big bullies, and some of them are choosing to, not cause any waves and just make sure that their family is taken care of.
Well, the medical association should be the one stating, okay, we now see that there's vaccine injured people. Here's what to do. They're the ones that need to speak up and do that, but they're not.
They were correct. They were one of the first people we reached out to when we organized. So we sent them a very well worded letter, talked about the NIH research and several of the types of adverse events that were going on. And it was signed by multiple medical professionals that were injured themselves. And we got no response back.
Is it because, well...
Yeah, exactly. People can answer that question on their own.
We'll just let the audience have their own opinion as to why they're not helping out.
Yep.
All right. As we close up here, I am curious to know your opinion on this. So obviously you had a vaccine injury. Do you still support this vaccine? Do you still support that people get it? I know you were before you had the injury, very, very for the vaccine.
That's a good question, because it still leads people to think that if they're going to listen to you, they have to know that you're in their camp first, right? But for me, all I'm trying to do is help people have full and informed, proper informed consent. They need to know the benefits as well as the risks, so then they themselves can go and make the best decision for them and their families. But for right now, I know for sure that the full picture is not out there for people. So essentially what's happening is people are able to read one half of a book when they need the other half to make a full informed decision.
I love that, because you need to know the side effects, because every single person's body and health of their body is different and it's individualized. So what might be great for one might not be great for another. And it comes down to that even with food. It's almost like, let's be transparent in all things. Let's be transparent on a food label, but let's also be transparent with a vaccine. On the food label, let's put everything that's in that food product on the ingredient label, which we don't have to do right now. And same with the vaccines. Let's just say everything that it could do or not do, and therefore people get to make their own educated choice.
Absolutely.
Okay, so as we're wrapping up here, for those that are listening, what do you suggest their next step is? Like, how can they help get the word out, or how do we do this in a kind and accepting way of maybe teaching that everything isn't fully transparent and everything isn't fully listed for people to know about?
Let's start with asking questions. Let's start having those conversations at the dinner table. And let's start putting on those, start exercising those skills that we all have, that for whatever reason during the pandemic, we were all conditioned to think that we can't have productive conversations with each other. Let's start with coming from a place of love and compassion, learning and listening to each other, understanding where each other's barriers are, and start exchanging those ideas and those concepts, those preconceived notions that we all have at this point. And let's start talking about adverse events to pharmaceutical products. Let's start looking at where this information is coming from. And so, and if you want to help us directly, please reach out to us at react19.org and let's start a conversation.
I love that about asking questions, because I think we were so extreme during the COVID, and maybe still are extreme, that it's either right or wrong, and that it's either the left or the right. And in reality, a lot of life is gray and a lot of life is in the middle, but we need to get to the middle by asking those questions and understanding where people are coming from and their point of view and their thought process on why something is beneficial to them. So I love that of asking questions, because that's really where it does start. And I think this episode is a great place for people to start asking questions. And, maybe they might have a family member or somebody who they're like, oh, maybe they are vaccine injured and we don't even know it. And so they can easily send them to your page. But again, it just comes down to acknowledging, loving, asking those questions in a kind and appropriate way. So thank you so much for sharing your story. I really could ask you so many more questions about your journey. I really hope the best for you and your health and everything that is to come in these next few months as you go through a really hard court trial case and things like that. Are you somewhere on social media that people can follow what you're doing, or are you trying to stay off of social media for court purposes?
So my lawyers have been very nice to me. They understand the importance of me advocating for other people like me. And so they're letting me stay on social media. They're letting me do podcasts like this. So thank you so much for having me on.
Well, thank you so much for being here and sharing your story.
I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram, Bri_Dressen, BRI_Dressen. Shadow banned like crazy. So you may be able to find me on there. If you do, awesome. And if not, thanks, Zuckerberg.
Yeah, I was just going to say the shadow ban is so hard. And even I'm trying to grow on TikTok right now, but I'm learning there's certain words that if I say like immune system or immunity, they shut down my store on TikTok within seconds of me saying it. And so people out there like, that doesn't happen. Censorship doesn't happen. Yes, it is so real. I saw it during COVID. I had to, say my words differently, and I couldn't teach about supporting your immune system. I would legit get these warnings saying you've been given a strike, 3 strikes, you're out. Do you think that's going to change though with all that's happened this past week with Mark saying, there was censorship going on?
Yes, and that it's very useful for me because we also are suing the White House, the CDC, HHS, because the White House specifically censored us. And, of course, then Zuckerberg then confessed this week that he censored us because the White House directly pressured him a lot. And he regrets now complying with the government pressure to censor. But we'll see. We'll see if that changes things on his platforms, and just like Twitter, and Twitter's supposed to be a big, non-censorship, platform. And to be totally honest, it's just a different type of censorship that goes on over there.
Yeah. So, wow. Okay. So you're suing not just the pharmaceutical company, you're suing more than that.
Yeah. So the first lawsuit I've ever filed in my life was actually against the President of the United States.
Wow. That's incredible.
It's for censorship. It's to restore every single American's constitutional right to free speech. We're not causing people to be bullied. We're not threatening people with physical harm. We're literally just trying to share our stories.
And so is that part of the court case that will go on in October?
This is actually a different one. So the court case starting at the end of October is against the drug company directly. This other one will happen in the state of Texas. And and that one's done by the NCLA, which is basically a new spinoff of the ACLU. And they're working to defend everybody's constitutional rights at a very grassroots fundamental level for people nationwide.
Wow, you have a lot going on. I wish you the best of health to get through all of this, because we need you fighting for our freedom of speech. It's incredible what you're doing. And like you said, it's freedom of speech, not for bullying rights or things like that. It's to, again, be transparent so that we can make educated choices with all the knowledge that's presented to us. So thank you for everything that you are doing. You are an incredible person to take this trial into such an amazing blessing and hope for others. And so thank you for being here. And I always end my podcast with asking my guests what they have found to be the best ingredient in life. What would you say it is?
For me, it's love. Without love, healing cannot come. Without love, you can't make those vital connections that provide the true fabric of living. And without love, we truly cannot thrive. So for me, it's love.
I love that. And the world needs more love right now, especially. So thank you. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you.
I am teaming up with Jared St. Clair and his team at Vitality Nutrition to encourage you to get outside this September. As school starts and schedules go back to normal, it is easy for us to spend a lot more time inside than we realize. Join us in trying to get outside to enjoy the last of the warmth and the beauty of the fall. Go to vitalitynutrition.com for more details on how to join the challenge. Thank you so much for listening. Remember to subscribe to the Just Ingredients podcast to learn more about your health and good ingredients to life. Plus, get daily tips at just.ingredients on Instagram.